Hello, hello, hello. Okay, I had to get my notes together so that I would remember what actually happened and what I'm talking about. So it's Kamilah Rose with the Bliss Institute. The cat will probably be making noise for quite some time. She's having a moment today. And today I'm going to do a quick recap. Probably won't be quick. Y'all know it takes me a while to do a recap. Recap and analysis of In the Shadow of the Moon, a Netflix movie that came out, I believe, on Friday. Starring Boyd Holbrook, Cleopatra Coleman, and Bokeem. I think it's Woodbine. It's got a pretty good cast. Not too many folks to keep up with, so that was nice. And it didn't drag on, which was lovely. Like I said, ignore the cat. And so we get an opening shot, right? Philadelphia, 2024. And there's a collapsing building across from the office space where everything seems like it's falling apart. Everyone seems like they left in a real hurry. There's a flag that flies down. It's got these fire holes through it. Only this flag only has 5 stars on it, so it's clearly not the current United States flag. And that's kind of like our opening shot. So then we get to Philadelphia, 1988, which I would like to know is a year after I was born. Let me see if I can get this cat to come chill out. Which was a year after I was born. And in this one, we have a concert pianist and a chef in a diner, and then we have a bus driver, and they're kind of all just going about doing their duties for their jobs. And then they start leaking blood through their nose, through their eyes. They're dead. Mysterious circumstances. Police are called in. They're trying to investigate and find out what happened. So we meet then Officer Locke and his partner Maddox. And they're trying to look into the deaths and find out what happened and how they died. So they're kind of exploring and seeing what happened. They're asking the questions. They're seeing that they have these marks on the back of their necks. It's 3 marks. And they're wondering kind of like, okay, so did someone shoot them or something? Is that what happened? Is that why they are, is that how they died? And then we find out there's a new victim in a nightclub, and she has the same knots on her, but she's alive. She's not dead yet. So they're like, fantastic. We can go and question her and find out what she knows. So then she tells them about how there was someone who came in, and she used interesting language. She was saying that she didn't belong in that neighborhood. And he was like, I don't know what that means. And so she was like, well, she was black. So now they know it's a young woman, that it was a young black woman, and that this is the person who's been going around and harming these individuals so that they were dying. But we don't get to hear too much from her because not too long later, she's dead. She's got the blood coming out of her ears and her nose and her mouth, and she is out. So they're really wanting to try to kind of keep things under wraps as to not cause any kind of hysteria or anything. But the current detective is like, well, you all don't get to make that choice. And he's like, I'll handle things. I'll try to figure out what's the best way to follow through with this. Let me see if I can figure out what to do with her. I don't know what you want. Come here. You want to go back here? You're not gonna like this. Come on. Come on. Okay. Let's try that. Okay. Sorry about that. Alrighty. Back now. Hopefully I'll be able to get through with the rest of this. So they realize that the person is still out there, the one who's been injecting these individuals, and that they can catch her. They get a sketch artist going. They get a sketch of what she looks like. They're pulling in all these random black women who maybe meet the profile and getting mugshots of them. And then we hear that someone has found her, that one officer has come into contact with her. And so now they're on the chase. They're running after her, trying to figure out, okay, where did this lady go? So they end up the Locke thinks it's someone else, but it turns out that's just a random dude. And then the next thing you know, because he's kind of not really paying attention, boom, her hands on the hood of the car. It's her. She's standing in front of them. And so she takes off running. They go off in chase of her. They end up getting her kind of down into a subway system. It kind of reminded me of The Wiz and how it looked during their subway scenes, which I was like, that's really nice as far as kind of making it similar to the time. And then Locke's wife is in labor. We find out that the wife is in labor and that she is trying to, and that he doesn't hear this because his radio's in the car and he's run after her now into the subway system. And so they start to fight. There's going back and forth. They're chasing her down. They start to kind of go back and forth. She's knocked out the partner Maddox and she's run off. And so now Locke is chasing after her and he kind of gets her cornered, but she knows his name. She asks him, is this where it happens? And then she congratulates him on his daughter. And she says she's sorry about his partner. They fight. She gets him into handcuffs. She handcuffs him to a bench. And then she says, I'll see you soon. And he injects her with the stuff that she had been injecting into others. And she's all very shocked and like, no, like, don't do that. She falls off the platform into an oncoming train and is killed. And so like, that's like kind of the opening. That's where everything starts off. That's where we start hearing about and finding about what's going on. So they find, because she's in pieces, so they're doing the forensics on it, and she has a bullet in her arm where she was shot with one of his bullets, even though he didn't shoot her. So he's like, well, I don't know how she got that in her hand because I didn't shoot her. But he's in the hospital because like his wife is in labor and he's trying to find her. Well, they're trying to talk to him about this bullet in her hand. And another nurse comes up to him and says, are you Locke? Because your wife is hemorrhaging. The baby's okay. We're trying to save her. You know, we really need your support. We need you to come to her room and we need you to kind of help us with this. So he goes in there and he at least gets to see his wife before she dies during the childbirth. And he assures her that everything's going to be okay. And it's just a really sad moment, you know, because the wife had been in the movie earlier and was discussing with him about how she hated that he was on this night shift, that they hardly ever got to see him. She was tired of having breakfast for dinner, and he was making her these awful pancakes with the ice cream on it. And, you know, they just didn't have a lot of time together, and especially not with this child. So now we're here. It's 9 years later. There are protests about the death of the young woman who died in the subway system because people are suspicious. They're like, we don't believe that an unarmed Black woman just happened to get killed in the subway and that it was from a armed cop who couldn't bring her in for questioning. The only outcome that ended up happening was her death. And so it's kind of very similar to the narrative that we hear now about questions about police brutality and about how it is that African American and Black people are obtained or treated within the police world. But Locke is with his 9-year-old daughter now, Amy. It's her birthday. She had to make her own pancakes as Locke is not very good of a parent. And she made them with ice cream. I think he had been using that as a coping mechanism, which I'm like, you can't do that for 9 years. And so she calls him out. They have breakfast together. Well, he doesn't want to. He asked her to put him in his fridge. He's just kind of never gotten over the death of his wife or what happened with this young woman who fell off the subway platform. And so she wants to go and do all these festivities for her birthday. And he's like, well, what do we need to do first? So they go and they visit the mother's grave. When they get there, there are fresh flowers along the seashell on the tombstone. And he's shocked by this. He's trying to figure out who would have done this. And so then they get a call. And it turns out the deaths are happening again. The little girl's upset because she's like, I don't want you to have to go and deal with this. It's my birthday. You should be spending time with me. And he's like, I'm saving lives. So they go into the police department. And, sorry, cat's moving around. Oh, goodness. Okay. So he asked for them to open up the case because it's the same manner of deaths. And so he has keys from the first time when she came around in 1988. And he has them research to see if they can find out more about what's going on with these keys. And so when they do that, um, they track it down to a car that was not made until 1997, which was a year after she showed up. Now, so they were like, how back in 1988, oh, this cat, did she have keys to a car that was not made until 1997? So they kind of go to track her down, and see the dealership who has this car, and he goes inside. There is the man who's working in the mechanic shop, and so he's very nervous. And we see that she's there, she's hiding, and the man is trying not to kind of give her away. And so Locke does the whole, like, give me a signal if something's wrong. And so he tells him to scratch his head, and he scratches his head, and then he asks him to draw the map to get back on the freeway. And he draws the map showing an arrow pointing that she's over there near, hiding along the wall. Then she jumps out. She's like, hi, Locke. She's like, we can't do this. And it's the cat. And then she's kind of got him cornered. Maddox shows up. Boom. Shoots him in the head, kind of like on instinct, because he just popped up. So now Maddox is very much dead. And we also see now why she apologized back in 1987 about his partner. It's so sad. Like, it's really interesting to see, because everybody's kind of dying around this dude. So the suspect snatches up Locke. She claims she's doing all this for a reason. She's saving people's lives. Now she starts to explain kind of the backstory of how she's doing this. So every 9 years, when the moon sets, or it becomes a super moon, she can come back, but not for very long. And so she really implores Tom, who is Locke, to stop chasing her, to go back to his daughter, to live a simple life, to just kind of let this go. And so we kind of start to really see that narrative of being able to let things go, to release, to not hold on to the past, because it hinders you from being able to actually live and take advantage of the present, or even to design the future. She pushes him out of the plane. How they got in this plane, like, I don't know. That's the part that seemed a bit unbelievable to me about all this, because this chick is everywhere. She's like a freaking, like, Neo from the Matrix. She's just making whatever she needs to. She on a plane. She's got run over by the car. She's just doing the most. So he gets pushed out of the plane, and then we jump. It's 2006. And in 2006, now I gotta go back to my other notes. We see that Locke is living in his car. So he's just completely gone off the deep end. He's digging up dead people. He's trying to see, like, if they have the marks, because these were people who were out of their jurisdiction, but they died on the same day, of different circumstances, not necessarily like murder or something like that. In this case, it was a Harold Novak, and he was identified as having died from a drug overdose. So he goes to visit Harold Novak's ex, and she lives in a house, has a big old Confederate flag on the outside. So yikes! So she's special. But she tells all the tea. She ain't got no problem spreading all of Harold's business. I don't know if it was just like, oh, he dead, I don't care, or what, but she was just like, here you go. Girl brings out a box. It's got all his old papers in it that he used to write, because he was a part of this real American movement. It was this kind of homegrown militia, and they were out to bring to empower real patriots and to take America back and make it what it was. Which I'm like, America, some of these ideals that you people would like to bring back were not the kindest to everyone, particularly people who look like me. So I'm not really, down for all of that. But she has the flag that they used to use, and it's the flag with the 5 stars that we saw from the beginning of the film. So then he has a picture, and it's of Harold with his ex-girlfriend Heather Russell, and she was kind of even more into it than he was. The ex-wife says that if he drank the Kool-Aid, she made the Kool-Aid. She was in it deep. And so she's like, I have the mailing list that he used to send these letters out to. He would mail them in these books. So like there was a book that came up for one of the professors during the 1997 killing, and it was and it was like, oh, okay, so he had that book on his desk. Probably he had one of the letters. He received the book from the letters that the Herald would write and send out to folks. And so Locke has to pay for the mailing list. And on it, he finds that there are addresses from the victims from 88 and from 97. So now he's like he's like, we finally found the connection, because they couldn't figure out anything that connected these individuals together. So then Locke goes to pick up Amy from school. And she's not all that happy with him. Locke has not been present, as we can see. He's been living in his car. He's been obsessing about this whole case. And so she's talking to him about how the guidance counselor thinks she'll be able to get a scholarship to go to Penn. And he's like, oh, I thought you were going to want to go out of state. And she was like, well, George wants to stay here. He's gotten a scholarship. And he's like, oh, okay. He was like, he seems like a nice guy. She's like, you've met him twice. And he's like, oh, right. I'm telling you, things are going to change. I'm going to be able to change stuff. And it's just like, it gets back to that whole, you're trying to still change the past or control the future, instead of understanding that you don't have to do any of that. You could change right now and things would be better. Like, she would have liked to have had him. This is crazy looking. Okay, sorry. She would have liked to have had him present there and now, not being so worried about controlling what might happen or trying to change what had already happened. And so she's like telling him, Dad, you have to learn to let it go. You need to shave. You need to like get your life back together. She's living with the lieutenant from before. So she's not even living with him. It's just really sad. And so now we have Locke meeting with the lieutenant to talk about this address, because he's asked her to get Heather Russell's address for him. And of course, the lieutenant's like, I'm not doing that. Like, you really need to let this go. I can't go any further into this. I've tried to be really nice about it, but you got to get your stuff together. Amy needs you. You're all she's got left right now. You have to learn to let this go. And so then, Locke goes on this whole thing, and he starts to kind of explain to him his theory that during these moons, because he ran into that physicist earlier in 1997 who was talking about the supermoons and how that changes the ability to be able to travel through time or cross back through time. And so Locke is telling his theory to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant is looking at him like he's crazy. He's like, what are you talking about? No. He was like, you've got to get some help. You're like, you've lost it. And so Locke pretends like he's going to change. He gives him a big hug, and I'm like, he's robbing you. He's robbing you. And of course he is. He's stolen his badge to get his number to find the address. So he finds her address, Heather and Russell's. He goes to it, knocks on the door. Heather's dead. She's leaking like everybody else. Here's the footsteps ahead of him. It's the suspect. She's back. She's back to finish the job. So he shoots at her, shoots her hand. There's a handprint on the mailbox. So this is how she got the bullet in the hand that we saw back in 1988. And so he chases her. There's a chase scene. She goes to the sewer. And this is where we see that this is where her time travel machine is. And he tells her this time, I'll see you soon. So now we're shooting forward. 2015, every 9 years, y'all. So Amy is pregnant now. The baby's due very soon. Locke is living on the beach. He's totally just like disconnected from everybody. It is a mess. The physicist that we saw earlier, he's still around because he had been missing. Locke had been trying to find him. He kidnaps. He's been doing these experiments on these pigs to see about testing out like the time travel, to test out the I guess microbes that they're using to kill the individuals. So they shoot them with the microbes. It lets them track them, and then it lets them detonate whatever the mechanism they're using to kill them remotely from the future. So the physicist comes in and kidnaps Locke to keep him from killing the time traveler, because he's like, oh, this time traveler, I thought they were doing something really wrong. They were killing people, but now I realize that they're doing something really important, that they're doing this now in order to stop something really big and awful from happening in the future. He says, how do you erase an idea? How do you do that? How can you do that? And he uses the example of the Civil War. He says, to stop the Civil War, who would you have to eliminate? Would you have to go back and get their parents? Would you have to go back and get people around them? Would you have to, how do you change an idea that's grown into something so large? And so they're squabbling. The physicist ends up getting killed. Locke emerges. He was hiding under the dead pigs. I was like, that's nasty. So the time traveler, she is back and she's right on schedule. She climbs out of her space in the sewer on the beach, and Locke is there waiting for her. And so she reveals, she says she knows him, that she's known him her entire life. And he's the one who told her to take the job, taught her how to ride a bike, made her first ice cream pancakes, held her the day she was born. And if you haven't figured it out by now, she is his granddaughter. She also has the bracelet from Amy, and she's like, this was my mother's. Boom, boom, boom. She's the granddaughter. So he's freaking out now because remember, he killed her back in 1988. She got broken in all these pieces. And he's like, I know I wouldn't kill you now, but I killed you already in 1988. And she was like, he says, you have to go back. You have to stop it. You have to stop me from doing this. She said, I can't. Time travel is one way. Once I start, I can't stop. It's not going to be something that we can change because it's already happened. And so he's breaking down. He's all sad. And she's just like, she tells him to go home and take care of his daughter, take care of her. And because she knows that she has to get this done. And so Locke goes to the hospital, and we start to hear a voiceover of kind of what started all of this. So going back to that scene at the very beginning with the building on fire and the people at the empty offices and just kind of the flag on fire and all the madness. Rhea, who is the time traveler, explains that when she was 9, that was when the first attack happened. It was an ordinary man who pulled up an ordinary truck full of explosives and detonated them, and it just started off this train of all these other folks who were in on this plan. And on the first day, 11,000 people died, and then millions of more later during a civil war. And then they came up with a way to stop it. They came up with a way to end this idea, and they were like, so who put out that idea, and how do we stop that event from happening? She said that she then decided to become a part of the untelling of the story to erase the idea, and that some thoughts were so evil that they were meant to be buried before they even began. And so then she's kind of gone through and done the things she needed to do. We see them eliminating the folks who were an initial part of this and very important in that happening. And we see the future beginning to be rebuilt and coming back to normal. And so then Locke makes it to the hospital. He sees Rhea being born. He holds her like she said she would. There's this really weird look at the end where like the baby, like the simulated baby, is looking at the camera, which I was like, I don't like all that. And then that's pretty much the end, I think it has some really interesting ideas, some rhetoric that's discussed in the film about, I guess, how do we take something that is so harmful and that leads to a lot of violence and death, and what can we do with it? And are you willing to, create more violence in order to stop an even larger catastrophe? There's that moral discussion. And then we also see the whole time travel conundrum, which is always kind of a thing when it comes to movies, lastly exemplified in the Avengers, the last Avengers movie. But overall, I thought the movie was really good. I thought the acting was fantastic. I thought everyone played their roles really well. Like I said, there weren't that many characters, which made it really nice. It made it much easier to watch and to follow. The storyline wasn't overly confusing. I don't know if it really served its point as it could have. I felt like it was still good. Yeah, there might have been a better way to maybe explore this idea. And especially, I don't know wise it is to put the idea out there that of the importance of controlling kind of the rhetoric or the ideas, the ideology that exists, and then eliminating those who have, although very harmful and violent, a different ideology than what would be desired. That's always kind of a fine line to kind of tread. You of course don't want people to harm others, but how far do we go to try to eliminate any thoughts that might deviate away from a more peaceful future? So that was the movie. Luckily, there weren't a lot of weird kind of supernatural things going on. There was just the whole thing with the moon and the whole super moons and being able to then use that as a way to time travel. And I guess it was pretty okay. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I would watch it again, but I liked it this time. So if you're wanting kind of like a sci-fi kind of buddy cop, maybe a little even bit of that social justice lens, this is definitely something to check out. It's not overly long. It's about an hour, I think maybe an hour and a half. And it kept my attention at least. And I even came back and watched it again just so I could make sure I got the notes. It did remind me of, there's a TV show called The Travelers on Netflix that you can check out. Only in that one, there's a whole like computer system that's controlling things and sending folks back, and they have to use host and take over their bodies, and their personalities are the things that actually travel through time, not their physical bodies. And then there's also this other show. I think I wrote down what the name of it is. I think it's called Time Stop. Let me see. There's another movie on Netflix called Time Trap. Strange, bizarre movie. Now, this is reminds me of a good old sci-fi movie. So if you're really looking for something that's a little like, what in the world? That Time Stop. That's a good one. Now, it's got a sad part in it. There's a sad death in there that I was like, dang, man, that's rough. That's a rough way to go out. But, they're stuck in this cave, and like time is different outside of the cave. And then like they're trying to get out of the cave, but they got to climb up the rock or something, and they can, and it's a mess. And of course, because time is traveling, time is changing much faster outside of the cave than like the rope break. It's just a mess. And then there's this whole thing with like some aliens and some other stuff. And I was just like, now this is a movie. Because y'all know I like them weird kind of cheapy movies. So that's a good one to check out if you're just kind of bored. I enjoyed it. It made me laugh, except for the sad death. And I think they bring him back. So one of the male characters died, and I think the aliens bring him back. When I tell you that movie it was something, and I was just like, oh, okay, I guess so. So anyways, check that one out. It's on Netflix as well. So anyways, that's my thoughts on In the Shadow of the Moon, and I'll see you all later. Have a great one. Bye.